Which brings me to our speaker, Tiffani Sharp. I've had this woman on my list of speaker nominees for 2 years. She is the founder of Willow Tree Roots, an international nonprofit with a mission of helping underrepresented women feel empowered to and through entrepreneurship. She is a licensed attorney with a specialization in international law and has spent almost 20 years advocating for the legal and economic rights of the underrepresented. She is, if you know her, she is the most energetic person I've ever met. I don't know how she does everything that she does, but she seems to still do it with a smile on her face. It's very inspiring. Please join me in welcoming Tiffani Sharp to the stage. Good?
Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. So I'm so excited to be here. 1, because I love Sacramento. 2, because I love the Urban Hive. And 3, because I love talking about what we're going to talk about today, which is justice, but we're going to talk about economic justice today. Justice isn't always carrying a picket sign or showing up to protest. Justice can really be more subtle. It can be putting your money in places where they matter. And so what I'm going to talk to you today is about economic justice and women of color in business and entrepreneurs and why that's so important and why we should all make this a priority. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I moved to Sacramento County when I was 5, so I've been here 40 years. Yes, I'm going to be 45 this year. I'm a Sacramento native. I went to Sac State and got a business degree. I went to McGeorge School of Law around the corner, got my law degree with a specialization in international law. I used to go to FACES when it was 18 and over, and that's how I learned my dance moves. So Sacramento is really, really where my heart is. I spent a lot of time working in the international sector for the past 15 years, working with women internationally, trying to achieve economic justice for underrepresented groups in other countries. And a few years ago, while actually working at the Urban Hive, when it was at the other location, I was pretty stuck in my bubble. Those of you that know me, I'm an introvert, so even though I'm standing up here, you'll probably won't see me out and about on the town. So when I'm working, I was just kind of in my little bubble, and I looked up and I noticed that there was a gap. There was a gap in resources, there was a gap in services for women of color entrepreneurs like myself. So I decided to start a Sacramento project called The Power of She, which stands for Shaping and Honing Entrepreneurs. And through this project, we're hoping to create sustainable women of color entrepreneurs to positively contribute to Sacramento's entrepreneurial ecosystem. I became an entrepreneur when I was 10 years old. My mother had taught me to sew. She brought me a sewing machine, and I was making Cabbage Patch Kid clothes and selling them to my friends. I made $120, which was amazing because I'm the only girl, I'm the youngest, I got bossed around, I was very sheltered and protected, and it was the first time that I had money that I could do with what I wanted to do and make my own choices and decisions. I wound up buying a bunch of dog toys for our German Shepherd. I think he got a dog bed as well. And then I bought more fabric and materials for other projects. Another friend had started a cookie business. I bought $20 worth of chocolate chip mint cookies that I ate for a month. And that's how I reinvested my money back. But that taught me about what being an entrepreneur really meant for me. I like to put this photo up because this photo really says a lot of things. This photo, it was taken at the first Women's March here in Sacramento in 2017. And this is one of my favorite quotes that I like to use. What we need is a revolution by women. And I like it because a number of reasons. I think it's absolutely true. And it comes from one of the people I respect most in the world, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And for those of you who don't know, Archbishop Desmond Tutu did a lot of work in South Africa around restorative justice after the end of apartheid. And what he noticed is that, and he even said for himself, men have made a mess of the world, and what we need is a revolution by women. So this is my favorite quote. I also put this up because it was actually at this march that I started to have some realizations about Sacramento. I started to look around and I started to listen to my peers around me, and I started to notice there was some gaps. And I hate gaps. I'm type A, I'm slightly OCD, I hate gaps. I hate gaps in the system. And I started looking around and I noticed there was a gap. There was a gap in representation in Sacramento. There was a gap in representation for women of color, and there's a gap of representation for people of color in general, but specifically women of color is my focus. And this really kind of hit me. Maybe I've been naive, but it was a revelation to me that there was a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done around inclusion, and this is why inclusion matters. So last year, Sacramento and its partners commissioned the Brookings Institute to analyze Sacramento and its economic prosperity. And what it found is that Sacramento is on an upward trajectory toward economic prosperity. And you can look around and see, I mean, here we are in this amazing space, all of these entrepreneurs, all of these creatives, and all of our tech, our restaurants, our infrastructure, our art. So we're on an upward trajectory toward prosperity, and that's what the Brookings report actually found. But what they also found is that, among other things, one of the things that will take us down is our lack of inclusion. The report found that racial inclusion in particular is a struggle here in Sacramento. So here's a chart. Here's where we rank among the top 100 metropolitan areas and areas of inclusion. And again, this is the top 100 metropolitan areas. So as far as growth, we're 67th. Prosperity, 71st. And inclusion, we're 84th out of 100. We are near the bottom. So Sacramento County's population diversity likely contributes to its rank among other regions nationally. High housing and transportation costs hinder household disposable incomes in Sacramento County. And the median household income, educational attainment, and other factors are lower than state and national averages. So these challenges disproportionately affect communities of color, affect earning potential, mobility, access to community resources and amenities, and can depress future opportunities for households and youth. And so in the work that I do and my organizational partners, we believe that the fastest way to remedy some of these economic disparities and injustices is through women of color in business and women of color entrepreneurs. Okay, so this kind of shocked me, but women of color in Sacramento comprise 46% of the female population in Sacramento County. That's almost half the women in Sacramento identify as of color. And you can just look around the room, and I can see it. I can see the diversity sitting right here. So just let that sink in for a second. Sacramento County, half the women are of color. So this affects you even if you don't identify as of color. What this also shows is that the median income for women of color varies and is significantly lower than the median income for women overall. In addition to Sacramento County's high rate of poverty, it has 22% of children living below the poverty line, and much higher rates for children of color. 36% for African American children, 27% for Latinx youth, and the high concentration of children of color living in poverty makes an additional compelling point about the potential for entrepreneurial investment in women of color to improve economic metrics and individuals' quality of life. And I'm going to talk to you about why that is. Whew, okay, so that's a lot of data. We're going to take a puppy pause. There's a lot of charts, a lot of data. It's a little early for that, it's Friday, but it's important to talk about these things. So I'm going to step away from the charts and the data. These are my dogs. On the left is Chewy, on the right is Ziggy. They're both rescue, and actually Chewy, with his mug right up front, he is Ziggy's therapy dog. So anyway. But I talked to you about how I became an entrepreneur when I was 10. I'm going to talk to you about how I became an entrepreneur as an adult. I became an entrepreneur as an adult in 2004. I was a practicing attorney, and in that year I got fired from 5 jobs, all run by men. I got fired from 5 different law jobs. And my father, who was doing my taxes at the time, I presented him with 5 W-2s, and he said, look, you need to work for yourself because you can't keep getting fired. And I can't keep doing your taxes if you're gonna keep getting fired. So I thought about it, and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna work for myself. And so after I got fired from my last job, I actually still hadn't figured out that this was the path for me. I had a lot of clients that followed me and just wanted me to continue their cases. So I said, okay, I'm gonna do these until I find a real job. I haven't had a real job since 2004. And what I found, yeah, yay. And what I found was this: being able to work for myself as a woman of color, I avoided the sexual harassment that I had experienced. 3 out of those 5 jobs, I got fired for refusing sexual advances. 2 of those jobs I got fired from were based on racial inequity grounds because I spoke up about things. And so what I found when I became an entrepreneur is I didn't have to deal with that. I don't know if I can say bad words, but I didn't have to deal with that crap anymore. I could actually ethically take the cases I wanted. I could set my own schedule. And I had aspirations at the time of becoming a mother. And I realized at that point that I could actually be a mother and be an attorney and be an entrepreneur and be a business owner all at the same time if I worked for myself. And I could make more money, I discovered. And this is not an uncommon thing or theme that women of color in business find for themselves. We go to work, we show up, and we have to deal with microaggressions every day. Can I touch your hair? How do you get your hair to do that? Oh, your skin, can I touch you? We have to deal with boundary issues. We have to deal with issues of privacy and respect. We have to just deal with issues about the way we look, the way we feel, the way our emotions are, the way we show up into spaces. And so a lot of women of color become entrepreneurs to avoid these things so that we can simply exist and live as who we are without having to show up every day and explain who we are. Okay, so who cares, right? Like, why are we, why is it important to invest in women of color businesses, right, if you're not a woman of color? Well, what we have found, the World Bank has found, our projects in other countries around the world have found, and what we found in this community is that investing in women of color, women-owned businesses themselves can accelerate household income and job creation, and this is even more so around women of color. So the American Express puts out a report, they're doing it annually, and their most recent one in 2018, it's called the American Express 2018 State of Women-Owned Business Report. And what it found is that firms owned by African American women grew by 163%, and by 172% for Latinas. Overall, the number of women of color-owned businesses increased by 163% between 2017 and 2018. But unfortunately, the revenues generated are far less than those of non-women of color businesses. And so this has significant implications for Sacramento, particularly in light of the Brookings report that came out, and particularly in light of the fact that, again, 46% of women are of color in Sacramento. This is important because typically women of color-owned businesses tend to hire from within their community once employees are needed. And women of color businesses also tend to be in businesses that provide services and products that benefit the community, and they reinvest their money back into the community. Now, this is to be said of all women-owned businesses. So women who are in businesses, and if you think about if you're an entrepreneur and you're a woman, what's your business and what service or product are you providing? I can pretty much bet that most of them are something that's going to help the community. When you start thinking about women of color businesses, that's even higher because there's an understanding about the community needs and there's a desire to help. Again, understanding that most women of color get into business to avoid some of the issues and problems in the traditional workplace. And so when profits are being made or start to be made, that money is reinvested back into the community to remedy these problems. We fix problems. Women of color fix problems. I'm just going to let that sit for a second. Okay. And this is exactly what our project with the Power of She has shown. Every single one of these businesses are to provide services and products that benefit the community. And so if you think about that, if we're trying to make Sacramento more inclusive, more economically prosperous, and women of color businesses are providing services to these communities that need it the most, and to all of us, then this is where our focus and our money should be. Here's some of the barriers that we're facing as women of color businesses, and I'm going to tell you how we can fix those, because we can all fix those starting once we leave here, right? It's not like something that we need to sign petitions for. It's not something that we need to march for. It's something that literally when you walk out the store or while you're sitting right here, we can work on this and fix it and help to do this. But let me help you understand where some of the barriers that we as women of color and women in general experience. Insufficient access to capital, okay? Women of color are funding their own startups and businesses, if you think about it. We are using resources that we have because we have fewer personal connections and fewer financing and funding options that are offered to us. When we try to go into a bank to borrow, we're often provided loans at higher rates. And we don't necessarily have the professional and personal networks embedded in the entrepreneurial and business community that can help us with access to capital. Bias, right? Like women in bias in the workplace. Women of color experience bias at a higher rate than women in general. Women experience bias in the workplace. Women of color and women-led startups are less likely to receive funding at the same levels as firms led by men. So a study of funding found that women-led startups, when they went in to request and pitch for funding, and they were asking their ideas, when it came time for funders to ask them questions, they were asked questions about preventing failure. How is your business? How is your startup? What are you going to do to prevent failure, assuming that it's going to fail? Whereas when men would go in to promote their projects and try to gain funding, they were asked about how they intend to promote their success of their business. So this is a whole mental mindset about women of color and women in general in business about the likelihood of success of our business. And this prevents a lot of women of color businesses from getting the funding that they traditionally would need. And lack of representation, just a lack of seeing somebody that looks like them sitting in front of them when they're asking the questions about funding. If the person that's asking the questions doesn't look like you, then they're going to ask you questions that don't necessarily understand where you're coming from. Inadequate education, experience, and skills. And again, this is access to resources. This is access to educational resources, access to networks. And this is exactly why I started the Power of She program within my nonprofit. I thought about the things that I was having problems with when I was becoming an entrepreneur, and the focus, walking into spaces, even business acceleration spaces, and being the only one that looked like me. And having to take that information that I obtained and rewire it to me as a woman of color in business. And so we started the Power of She program specifically to provide these resources, provide this information, provide these networks geared toward a woman of color entrepreneur. What's it like when you go to pitch in front of a funding and you are the only woman of color, maybe even the only woman? And so this lack of education, skills, and experience surrounding the resources needed with a gear toward women of color also is a barrier to success. Lack of access to developed business networks. Again, having networking, right? If you think about networking and when you go into business entrepreneurial networking in spaces, women of color, there may be one or two, but the vast majority are not, unless it's a specifically geared networking event for people of color. Also, I've had a lot of, when we're doing the Power of She program, I've had a lot of service providers in Sacramento help out and say, I've been trying to get into this, area where I can help more women of color, but I just don't know how. And so there's a disconnect in our community. We're not talking to each other, we're not helping each other, we just don't know how to do that. And so that's one of the things that we're going to talk about, how we can overcome that. And again, targeted outreach and support, actually looking at material, looking at how do we make a priority for women of color businesses. Because again, 46% of us in Sacramento County are of color, and a majority of our businesses and services help the community. So this should be a priority. So what can we do together? Let's talk about some of the things that we can do together, and I'm going to talk to you about what you can do today, this weekend, after I'm done talking. I really want to showcase this because this is one of our Power of She Entrepreneurial Incubator participants. This is one of the things you can do, is you can book a tour with Capital Tuk Tuk. She's a woman of color entrepreneur in Sacramento. And what this is a tuk tuk touring service here in Sacramento. I think there's a Wide Open Walls tour. So you don't have to ride your bike around, which I normally do every year, but it's, Sacramento, and it's like 100 plus hell this weekend. So book a tour with Capital Tuk Tuk. There's me, and I have to tell you, I've been in Sacramento County for 40 years, and I have not seen Sacramento like this. You get a different perspective and a different view of how beautiful Sacramento is and how stunning it is. And you can sit, and it's shaded. She's got pillows. You don't have to worry if you want to drink some wine or whatever of your choice, whatever imbibement of your choice that's legal in California. You can do this. And there's little curtains that you can put down. This is one way that you can support women of color businesses. You can actually book a service. You can go and you can put your money there. And I'm telling you, it's awesome. It's not like buying something from a woman of color business just to say you did it and you put it away and you'll never use it. This is amazing. And this is, it's all electric. So it's an electric vehicle. And so it's good for the environment, it's good for the community, it's good for the soul, it's good for business. So these are some of the things that you can do. You can actually actively support women of color businesses here in Sacramento. There's a ton of them, and you just maybe not know about them. If you want to have your coffee and you want to try something different, Tiffani Coffee down the street on Alhambra here is a woman-owned business, a women of color-owned business. If you're thinking of somewhere to go to eat, right, go to Queen Sheba. This is right around the corner over here. Okay? There's a lot of things that you can do to support women of color businesses. And again, this is what's needed, economic support, because economic support is economic justice. So you can actually take your money, you can support it. On our website, we have a database that we're putting together of women of color-owned businesses. So you can go through there, scroll through there, you can add things if you like, if you know a woman of color business that isn't on there, and start thinking actively about it. What can I do? So when you're going out to make your purchases, when you're buying your products, when you're obtaining your services, when you are looking for things to do for entertainment, try having one of the first questions be, okay, where's a woman of color businesses? Are there any women of color businesses that I can support? And if we do that together, we're going to get there. So a lot of the data that I was going through is here in our report that we just came out with. And our project, The Power of She, we were lucky enough to get a Rails grant from the city of Sacramento this year, which is, so yay, Sacramento. The city of Sacramento understands why this is important. And this report was one of the things that we were commissioned, that we were allowed to do with the money that they gave us. And so a lot of this data and statistics is in the report. You can go online and download it. Also, the database is on there too. And it's got all those fun charts and stuff. The picture of my dogs are not in there, but I'll bring them to you if you want to babysit them. And take a look at what's going on in Sacramento. Let's make a conscious effort to support economically, because again, some of us don't have time to show up at marches. Some of us aren't comfortable with shouting from the rooftops what we think is right or wrong. But your money is your power, and so this is how you can support economic justice for women of color in Sacramento.